Hello everyone, William Tramp, also known as This Effin GM here, ready for this week's installment of This Effin Monster. Last week we dropped in on the ever-deadly assassin and discussed the Monster Manual's approach to creating non-player character stat blocks. This week we will be growing in our knowledge with a deep dive on awakened plants. For this video, we're taking a look at two stat blocks, the awakened shrub and the awakened tree. And you might think that this will blossom into a longer video, but I have a feeling we'll be able to cut this down pretty quick. So let's get ready to harvest some knowledge with this effing monster, Awakened Plants. The base stats for both the tree and shrubs are almost identical between the two iterations of 5th edition. In 2014, the shrub had abysmal ability scores, with its highest being Constitution at an 11, Intelligence and Wisdom at a 10, and the rest being below average. This has not changed in 2024. In fact, virtually nothing has changed for the shrub. Its small size, armor class, initiative, hit points, speed, vulnerability to fire, resistance to piercing, senses, and challenge rating all remain the exact same. When we take a look at the awakened tree, we see much the same. The 2014 tree had a great strength of 19 and a constitution of 15, and those remain the same, as do its other ability scores: huge size, armor class, initiative, hit points, speed, vulnerability to fire, resistance to bludgeoning and piercing, senses, and challenge rating. In fact, the only difference between the two versions are the languages. In 2014, both the Awakened Shrub and the Awakened Tree could only speak one language as designated by its creator, and players had to hope that the druid who gave these plants sentience chose a language that they share, whereas in 2024, both plants can speak Common and one other language. That's right, even a tree and a shrub in Dungeons & Dragons can speak twice as many languages as the average American citizen. Hey-o! This change will likely mean nothing more than a slightly less persistent headache on the part of players whose dungeon masters try to use these encounters as a way to force them to come up with charades for plants. Alright, let's talk traits. In 2014, both the Awakened Shrub and the Awakened Tree had a singular trait: False Appearance. False Appearance in 2014 allowed the monster to be able to hide in plain sight, seeming only as a normal plant until it decided to make a move of some sort. In 2024, that trait is gone. This is not surprising, as we've already seen this trait be removed from the animated objects, and I discussed that in this video here. Now, other than the removal of False Appearance, the awakened plants remain traitless. Wah wah. Another area awakened plants lack excitement are in their actions. In 2014, the Awakened Shrub had the Rake action, which allowed them to make a single attack at a +1 bonus against a target within 5 feet and hit for an average of 1 damage. What was interesting about this damage is that it provided one of the rare occasions in which a monster could possibly do 0 damage, as the dice expression for the Rake attack was 1d4 minus 1. In 2024, this anomaly has been removed, as well as really any dice expression, and the Awakened Shrub now deals 1 point of damage. As for the Awakened Tree, in both 2014 and 2024, it has a singular attack: a Slam. The Slam is made at a +6 to hit against a target within 10 feet for an average of 14 points of damage. That's it. No changes for the tree, and a slight damage modification for the shrub. Actions away! Okay, how would I use them in battle? With all the amazing tactical options that these creatures have, it's going to be difficult to pin down just one strategy, but I'll give it a go. A wink! The shrub is the most basic stat block I think one could imagine, which fits its challenge rating of 0. My assumption would be that awakened shrubs that seek combat, likely due to being in a guard in a garden or something, would likely seek a direct confrontation, springing from the pot or earth they stand in and rushing a target who moves to within 20 feet of it, seeking to flail at it with near ineffectual damage. The shrub is surprisingly wise enough to understand when it's outmatched, and would probably bolt from battle once it's reduced to 4 hit points or lower, assuming it still stands. The Awakened Tree has a lot more staying power than the shrub, and has the advantage of reach, but overall would use similar tactics, moving to attack an enemy who moves within 30 feet of it. Now, the tree would stick around until it's reduced to 23 hit points or less before seeking to lumber away to a more safe location. Now, neither one of these creatures is combat savvy enough to use the disengage action, likely just dashing away as best as it can from its attacker. Now, both of these creatures would recognize the inherent danger in fire, as they're both vulnerable to it, and they would seek to avoid combat at all with any creature who's wielding it. Now, what would I change about them? These monsters, to put it lightly, are pretty boring. But when I imagine what a sentient plant could do, well, I have a lot of thoughts. I think there's a lack of imagination to these creatures' attacks, and I personally would up the ante and use attacks that can cause, say, the poison condition, or restraint from tendrils, or blindness from a flurry of leaves. Speaking of attacks, an awakened tree screams for more of them. A multi-attack action would do well on a creature with this many limbs, right? If maintaining the challenge rating is concerned, maybe give them at least 2 attacks, dealing 1d8 plus 4 damage apiece. That'd be a lot more interesting. Yeah, it would reduce the average damage per round, but it would increase the chances for a critical. I think that'd be pretty great. Looking at the plants that we've been given, we have a huge size and a small size, and I would have liked to see more options like a medium-sized hedge, or a large-sized topiary sculpture, or even a swarm of flowers. Finally, if I could change anything about awakened plants, I would absolutely remove the fire resistance from these creatures. I know, it's a staple for plant-based monsters in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, but every time I see it, it weirds me out. I mean, a tree is only really burnable in specific conditions, and fresh-cut logs of a living tree take forever to burn. I don't know if you've been camping, but it's not easy when those limbs are still living. Now, a human, on the other hand, reacts poorly to fire in pretty much any condition. Why aren't we vulnerable to fire? This is just something that I think about, probably more than I should. And that's it. That's the Awakened Plants in the 2024 Monster Manual for Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition. I know, probably my most exciting video yet. But if you like this, then make sure to join me next week as I take a look at the angriest bird in all of Dungeons & Dragons, the dire ostrich. Yep, I mean the axe beak. Thank you for joining me today on this discussion of Awakened Plants. And if you are so inclined, please consider liking this video and subscribing to this channel, as I'm trying really hard to achieve my goal of 5,000 subscribers by the end of this year, and every like and subscribe helps. Also, did you know that I have a Patreon? I keep a link in the thing below. I release all of these videos a week in advance on that Patreon. Hey, if you feel like giving, I won't say no to that. Either way, I hope that you have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you next time on This Effin' Monster. Finger wink.